Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and we're feeling really good about today's video because let's be honest, you f***ed up. Okay, well, maybe you didn't, but we don't know that yet because there's three guys right now that are very polarizing due to injury issues that we have seen creep up recently. So, did you f*** up by drafting them, or are they going to turn out to be banger picks at their positions this year? Hit that like button for me because we're going to be giving a draft guide away in this video, but you could get a draft guide for absolute free right now if you head over to Prize Picks or you download their app and use code word headliners. That is right. prizepicks.com or the app. Use code word headliners. When you create your account, deposit $20. Not only are you going to get a free draft guide, but we're going to put you into our August giveaway, which is a Mike Evans autographed game used cleat. You are not going to want to miss out on that. And speaking of free draft guide winners from one of my last videos, players to avoid, my man Rafi69 Bomb gets himself a free draft guide with one of his comments that he left on the video. Rafi, appreciate you. I believe you just became a member not too long ago as well. So thanks for all the support. You're going to be winning a draft guide. Our randomizer ended up picking your comment. So congratulations. Make sure you shoot us an email, info@thefantasyheadliners.com. And for those of you out there that want to win a draft guide for yourself, again, this video gets 1,500 likes. Hit that like button and you leave a comment down below. I am going to pick one of you to get that free draft guide. But more importantly, if you're new here to the channel, you need to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Things are blowing up. By the time this video gets to 24 hours out, we better be at 150,000 subscribers, ladies and gentlemen. We're just a couple of hundred away right now, which is crazy because just a couple of days ago, we hit 149. So y'all are insane. Appreciate the support. But now it's time to talk about whether or not you f***ed up. First guy up is going to be Christian McCaffrey. Now, is Christian McCaffrey going to be the guy that we saw a couple of years ago, or is he going to be the guy that we've seen more recently? Now, over the last two seasons, obviously he's been injured. He's had only a total of 158 attempts, 667 rushing yards, 60 targets, 54 receptions, 492 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns. So those numbers by themselves obviously don't stand up over the course of a full season, right? You look at those numbers and you say, ugh, not great, but he's been injured. So what did he do on a per game basis during the last two seasons? Well, he's had 15 attempts per game, 66 rush yards per game with 6 targets, 5 receptions, 49 receiving yards, averaging 0.8 touchdowns per game. Now, his two big seasons that he's had so far, going back to 2018, 2019, his total over those two seasons, much higher. 506 attempts, 2,485 rush yards, 266 targets, 223 receptions, 1,800 receiving yards, and 32 total touchdowns. Now, again, that doesn't paint the whole picture because it just tells you everything he did through those 2 years. But what about taking a look at a per game status now? Well, those numbers look kind of familiar, don't they? 77 yards on 15 attempts per game, catching 7 of 8 targets for 58 receiving yards and 0.88 touchdowns. You know what that looks a lot like, right? Well, that looks like his 2020-2021 numbers. So it's easy to see that even when Christian McCaffrey was hurt the last couple of years and didn't really give you everything that you wanted for every single game because he wasn't healthy, he was still putting up good numbers when he was healthy, and they weren't shying away from it. They still were giving him 15 attempts per game. Now, his rush yards did drop a little bit. 1 less target, 2 less targets, 2 less receptions per game, but still was very close to the same receiving yards, and he averaged the same amount of touchdowns. So the numbers are pretty darn close. So what could we see going forward in 2022, talking about a per game projection? Well, after I went through the numbers and crunched them a little bit, I still say we see around 15 attempts per game, that he continues to be a guy that gets you 15 rushing attempts per game on the ground, averages about 4.25 yards per carry. So far over the course of his career has been right in that area. I'm going to put him right at 4.25 just because to see a ton of efficiency on the line this year. Don't know if it all comes this year unless Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold really step up. For the targets, I am bumping the targets down a little bit because this is where I believe we see Christian McCaffrey kind of take a step back in terms of the touches because you've got lots of weapons there. You've got Terrace Marshall, you've got DJ Moore, and you've got Robbie Anderson on the outside. So is there really a need to give him, if you're looking to scale back his touches because you want to be careful and you want to keep him healthy, it would make more sense to do it in the passing game, knowing that you've got more than enough guys around you to help pick up the slack and continue to give him the amount of touches on the ground. And we've seen him average right around 0.85 touchdowns per game. I'm going to keep him right in that area because I believe he'll still continue to see a ton of work at the goal line. So let's bake a little bit into the equation here. Let's just say that Christian McCaffrey isn't going to be healthy for all 17 games. Let's give him 14 games. We're going to err on the side of caution here, and we're going to say that these are the numbers that Christian McCaffrey averages in 2022 on a per game basis. So if he does that over the course of 14 games, and just remember, 14 games, we're being cautious with it because now if you say, okay, I think he's going to be fully healthy and fine, you can start to work those numbers up a little bit. But over the course of a full season, you're going to see just over 200 attempts, which I agree with. He's going to run for just under 900 yards. That could bump up a little bit. If he's a little bit more efficient, if the passing game works well, could see some more efficiency there, see him get closer to 1,000 yards. But for now, 892. Catching 70 of 84 targets for 630 receiving yards. And I'm going to give him 12 total touchdowns on the season. Now, the reason I'm giving him all of that in terms of touchdowns is because, well, like I just mentioned, he's still going to see a lot of work at the goal line. So if you look at this in terms of fantasy points, his 892 rushing yards would convert over to 89.2 points. His 70 receptions would give you 35 points in a half PPR format. His 630 receiving yards would give you 63 points, and his 12 touchdowns would give you 72. If you add that all together, you're going to come up with 259.2 points. Now, where would that put Christian McCaffrey among finishers last year? Running back 5. And that's why this is such a tough decision. Because if Christian McCaffrey is healthy, even for 14 games, you've probably got a top 5 running back. So to spend a top 5 pick on him makes a whole lot of sense. And again, if you think he's going to get hurt, if you think he's going to miss some games, I just bake that into the equation for you. Maybe you say he scores less touchdowns. Possibly, but even if you bump it down to 10 touchdowns, you're still looking at a top 10 running back. And I already took away some of the targets through the air. So maybe you don't agree with me there and you say, well, we're going to add more targets. Well, if you're adding more targets, that's just going to make those points go up a little bit. Maybe you don't think he's going to get 200 rushing attempts. Maybe you're trying to back that off a little bit. Well, he should still, even if you give him just under 200, he should still be over 800 some odd yards. So even if you move back and forth on all these numbers, if he gives you 14 healthy games in 2022, Christian McCaffrey should be a top 5 running back. What about the other former top tier running back that has been missing some time? Saquon Barkley. Taking a look at Saquon Barkley over the last 2 seasons. Okay, the numbers haven't looked great, but again, because he's been injured and he's missed a ton of time. 181 attempts, 627 rush yards. He's caught 47 of his 66 targets for 323 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. If you look at that on a per game average, 12 attempts, 41 rushing yards, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 21 receiving yards, 0.26 touchdowns per game. So obviously those numbers are garbage, right? Those numbers are really, really bad. So let's take a look at when he was really balling out in his prime, 2018 and 19. 478 attempts, ran for 2,310 yards, 194 targets, caught 143 of those for 1,159 yards, and scored 23 touchdowns between the 2018-2019 season. If you put those numbers together, you're getting 79 yards on 16 attempts, 5 receptions on 6 targets, 39 receiving yards, and 0.79 touchdowns per game. Now, there's a big discrepancy here, and the main reason is because when you take a look at it, obviously it has a lot to do with how bad the New York Giants have been. On the offensive side of the ball, with Daniel Jones at quarterback, a less than stellar offensive line, and guys rotating in and out at wide receiver because nobody could stay healthy. That's going to mess with you a little bit. So when we take a look at the 2022 projections, I'm going to try to be as lenient as I can on him here. Okay? I'm still going to give him 14 attempts per game. It's hard to imagine that he doesn't go a little bit higher than that. Over the course of his first 2 years in the league, he was averaging almost 5 yards per carry. Over the last couple of years, he's been averaging far lower than that. Even with this offensive line being as bad as it is, even with Daniel Jones, I would still have to say that because of how good Saquon Barkley can be, 4.25 yards per carry is going to be right in that area for me. 6 receptions on 7 targets. I actually am giving him a bump up in his targets and receptions back to previous years and not what we've seen the last couple of years, because honestly, Daniel Jones ain't it. And not only that, but again, you've got guys at the wide receiver position that just are not reliable. During the course of this time, he's averaged just over 9 yards per reception. I am going to bump him back just a little bit on that, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt of 0.5 touchdowns per game. So, again, same thing. I'm going with 14 games because the main reason that you're saying you don't want to draft Saquon Barkley is because he's been injured so much. So let's bake that into the equation. Let's put that as part of the recipe. 14 games is going to give you just under 196 rushing attempts, 833 rushing yards, 98 targets, catching 84 of those for 672 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. This could be a team that is behind quite a bit. That's going to give Saquon Barkley a little bit more room in the passing game. But again, maybe you're looking at it and you're saying, I want to give him a few more rushing attempts. Okay, go ahead, give him a few more rushing, give him a few more yards, whatever you want to do. You can mess with that a little bit. What's that going to look like, though, in terms of fantasy points? So here we go. 83.3 points will come from the rush yards. 98 targets. I mean, that's not going to give you anything, right? I started reading a little bit too quickly. 42 points is going to come from 84 receptions. 67.2 points are going to come from receiving yards, and 42 points are going to come from 7 touchdowns. That's going to give you a grand total of 234.5 fantasy points. Now, if you're a Saquon Barkley truther and you look at these numbers and you say to yourself, they seem low. Maybe you think he's going to score more touchdowns. Maybe you think he's going to have more attempts. Again, I purposely made some of these numbers a little on the lower side so then people couldn't be like, but Kyle, you're being way unrealistic with his numbers. Because if you want to bump it up at all, he's going to score more than 234 fantasy points, which would have made him the RB6 last year. So if you think that Saquon Barkley is even close to any of these numbers, and you think he gets at least 14 games in a season, this dude, again, just like Christian McCaffrey, is a top 10 running back. Do you think that you've messed up yet? Do you think you've effed up your draft yet? Let's take a look at one more guy. We're going to go to the wide receiver position with Michael Thomas. What happened to Michael Thomas? Well, let's just say that the last time he scored a touchdown, nobody knew what COVID-19 was. And that might seem like a long time ago for a lot of you. And it was, because it was like November 2019, the last time Michael Thomas scored a touchdown. And when he did get a chance to play in 2020, because he missed all of 2021, when he did play in 2020, he only had 40 receptions on 55 targets for 438 receiving yards and 0 touchdowns. On a per game average, that's not good at all. So the little time that he was on the field last year was not good. It was not good. But we remember Michael Thomas being an absolute legend. I mean, really, since he's entered the league, he's been very, very good. But 2018, 2019 were absolutely phenomenal years. Had 332 targets over the course of those 2 seasons, caught 274 of them for 3,130 receiving yards and 18 touchdowns. Ladies and gentlemen, those are sick numbers. That's catching 8 of 10 targets, averaging 101 receiving yards, and scoring 0.58 touchdowns per game. That's crazy. The discrepancy in the numbers between 18 and 19 and 2021 are really different. So what are we going to get from Michael Thomas this year? What are we going to get from him? Well, again, let's do the same thing. Let's play the what if game. I love bringing out the chalkboard, okay? The former teacher and myself loves to bring out the chalkboard and break down these numbers for you, okay? I'm going to give him 8 targets and 6 receptions per game. I'm going to average in 11.5 yards per reception. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. That only comes out to 69 receiving yards per game, and I'm going to keep him at 0.58 touchdowns per game because he's had at least 9 touchdowns per season in 3 of his years. So 9 touchdowns has kind of been the magic number for him. Now, the big concern for me is the fact that you've got some really good players around you. You've brought Alvin Kamara back. Okay, he's back. He's a part of the team. Okay, but you've drafted at this point Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave. Sorry, mixing up the Ohio State wide receivers. You drafted Chris Olave and you have Jarvis Landry. So you have really brought in a lot of players. Okay, that's going to take away from what he has. So to say Michael Thomas, let's say again, I'm keeping this 114. I'm going to keep these 14 games. I'm going to keep these 14 games for him as well. Because again, I want to bake into the equation missed games. And I think taking away 3 games is kind of a nice stance on it. But in 14 games, if he has numbers in this area, he's going to catch 84 of his 112 targets for 966 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. I think that's realistic. Because again, you have Chris Olave, you have Jarvis Landry, and you still have Alvin Kamara there. We know that Jameis Winston is going to air it out, and he's going to throw the ball around a little bit. This defense, it might be good, it might not. It's hard to tell still at this point how good it could still be, especially in that division, because that division could be up and down a little bit. So if they're going to be passing a whole lot, these numbers aren't that bad, I don't think. So if we throw them to the fantasy wolves and try to figure out how many fantasy points that's going to be, you're going to get 42 points for the receptions, half PPR leagues. You're going to get 96.6 points for the receiving yards, and you're going to get 48 points from the touchdown. Again, taking away a little bit of that volume, but understanding that he could still score a decent amount of points is what we need to have. From him. So that would give us 186.6 fantasy points. But where does that leave him in the equation of wide receivers from last year? Well, I can tell you that if that volume goes down, that his outcome isn't going to be nearly as high as what we could see from Barkley or McCaffrey, because then you're looking at only having about a wide receiver 21 season from Michael Thomas. And again, that might be true. You've got Chris Olave, you've got Jarvis Landry, you know that Jameis Winston, even though he slings the ball, he can be a crapshoot at times. You're going to have to know that Alvin Kamara is going to get a decent amount of looks in the passing game. He's just not going to be forgotten about. So it's hard for me to sit here and say that a guy that hasn't scored a touchdown since 2019, and a guy that hasn't been fully healthy in 2 years, and a guy that has had these mystery injuries where he's just missing time out of nowhere, where he didn't seem like he was interested in getting back on the field. It's hard for me to bank on a guy being the main contributor of that offense again. Now, if you draft him where he's currently going and you get a low-end wide receiver 2 season from him, that's not bad. But if his ADP tries to climb at all, and if you think you're going to be drafting him as your wide receiver 1, that is where I say you've done effed up. All right. That's where we have problems. That is where I would have to say, we're going to draw a line. So for Michael Thomas, he stays where his ADP is. And me personally, I'll take him as a wide receiver 3. That's where I get comfortable. I am more concerned about Michael Thomas being re-injured this season than I am Christian McCaffrey and then I am Saquon Barkley, because their injuries aren't nearly as the breaking down type that Michael Thomas is. And Michael Thomas's injury is one that continues to nag him. It's his, I mean, he's had so many issues with his ankle. You have to have strong ankles. You got to be able to run strong routes. And even though we've seen video of him so far this year at training camp, I don't believe he's fully healthy. Some of his routes don't look that sharp. They don't look that crisp. He's accelerating all right. He's rounding a lot of stuff off. He's not breaking in and out of his routes the way that he used to. And that's what concerns me about Michael Thomas. But I wanted to go through this video and find out today, if you draft any of these guys, if you think you effed up. And if you did, let me know down in the comments below if you'd be happy still with the production you got. And also, given their current ADP, who would you rather have more out of these guys? Christian McCaffrey at like the 2 or 3, depending on the type of league that you're in. Saquon Barkley in like the beginning of the 3rd, or he's starting to creep up into the 2nd. He's into the 2nd now, or we're taking Michael Thomas a few picks later. What is the best bet? Leave it in the comments down below. Hit the like button for me. Draft guide at 1,500 likes to somebody in the comments. Subscribe if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners. And let's hope by the time this video has been out, we are at 150,000 subscribers. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm out. Peace out. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain. All the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. Y'all stuck on 3rd down. Your content's plain Jane. Headliners on top now. We gonna move and change. Podcast off the rip. Draft guide, so legit. Fantasy world, our game tight. You know we about that chub life. Stuck in a rut and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this Headliner Nation.
I'm a headliner.